Make that big boss less special. It ain't no game, but they saying welcome to the second level. Second level. Second level gaming. Second level.
That's me in the middle, whipping ass. It was here I became legend, my dominance absolute. I eviscerated opponents quarter after quarter, token after token, until I stood on gaming's mountaintop. Alone.
Canadian game studio Secret Location has created a world's first for VR, a bullet hell game. If you're unfamiliar with the genre, allow me to give you a brief history lesson. Way back in 1993, the now defunct Japanese developer Toaplan released an arcade game called Batsugan. Upon reaching the first boss, the game's players would realize that this wasn't your typical shooter. This was what the Japanese call danmaku. The very literal translation of this is barrage. However, it's often mistranslated as bullet curtain or the now more familiar bullet hell. Turns out, the challenge was welcomed with open arms and expanded upon in later titles, until you have games today like Enter the Gungeon, being released to mass appeal and critical success, although the genre always does particularly well in its home country of Japan. Despite appearances, oftentimes bullet hell games give the players a smaller hitbox than usual, to give the players somewhat of a chance to survive the chaos. The first question I had upon watching the 90s nostalgia-dripped trailer for Blasters of the Universe was, how the fuck do you do a bullet hell game in VR? I now have my answer, and it's kind of genius. Blasters of the Universe tells the tale of an all-powerful arcade player gone mad called Grandmaster Alwyn, who was a legend in the arcades of the 90s until one day he downloaded his consciousness into a virtual world where he created his own maddening universe with lots and lots of bullets. It's up to you to take him down a peg and return to your own world. Grandmaster Alwyn taunts you along the journey, and of course fusses like a giant man-baby when you take down his creations, which only makes it more satisfying to do so.
You're so special! Hey, spoiler alert! A giant robot is about to burst out of the ground and whip your ass!
The main game consists of 4 levels: casual and hardcore difficulties, a challenge mode that changes with frequency to different loadout types and world settings, and I managed to complete a casual playthrough in around 2 hours. Fans of bullet hell games will probably want to jump straight into the harder difficulty mode and enjoy the challenge. One of the absolute best things about the game is the gun customization. Boasting 130,000 possible loadouts, you can chop and change multiple aspects of your gun, from the base to the clip type, fire modifiers, bullet type, shield types, you name it. It's easy to do and vital to your success in Grandmaster Alwyn's devious world. I often found myself losing and retreating back to the armory to chop and change things up a bit before jumping back in to see if I could make a bigger dent. All items need to be unlocked through play, which causes a feedback loop of trying to get a little further each time, if only to get that next modification option for your gun and have a higher likelihood of survival on the next attempt. At the end of each world lies a boss. If you fail to take them out, it's back to the start of the level for you, which only makes these encounters more intense. Sense of scale during these fights is fantastic and actually makes the bosses far more intimidating because of it, heightening the challenge even further. So back to my original question. How the fuck do you do a bullet hell in VR? The answer: by making your head the hitbox. You can ignore the bullets heading towards your torso, legs, arms, etc. Your head is your only weak point, so that means you'll need to make it harder to hit. Fans of Super Hot should have an idea of what to expect next. You will be ducking and diving and crouching and weaving and generally doing your best Neo impression in your living room while utilizing your shield or special abilities for when things get a little too hot. You can't just dodge though. You need to try and quell the tide of bullets, which means using that fancy gun of yours to strike back at the same time. So what follows is somewhat of a combination of Hollow Ball, Dick Wild, and Super Hot.
You should have sworn obedience when you have the chance.
Set the early 90s nostalgia to stun, and baby, you got a stew cooking. I loved Blasters of the Universe. The art style and enemy creatures were cool, the music was awesome, Grandmaster Alwyn is actually quite funny as an antagonist, the gameplay was a ton of fun and challenging to boot. Just a solid title all around. If I had any complaints, it would be that at 4 levels, the game feels extra short. It was over before it ever really felt like it got started. Granted, just passing those 4 levels on the easy mode still took me 2 hours, so God knows if I'd ever make it through the real challenge. The locations are also quite similar in nature. It would have been nice to have perhaps shaken up the backdrops a little bit, just to change the color palette a touch while still keeping the 90s theme. Secret Location has promised to update the challenge area often to maintain the player base, and I really hope that's enough to keep players entertained. Guess we'll see. Honestly, I never would have imagined a bullet hell in VR to have worked so well, but I'm pleasantly surprised at how this game turned out, longevity and locale aside. I hope we see future DLC and eventually a much longer sequel. No VR game has made me feel quite this badass in a while. Thanks for watching.
You're in my universe now, Blaster. Prepare to get your ass whipped.